Welcome to the world of scary stories. Subscribe, like, and share your creepiest stories in the comments. I'm waiting for everyone. Get your ears ready. Here we go. My family disappears for a day once a month. They say it's a family affair, so I shouldn't ask. Every family has its quirks. Some have grandfathers who keep Soviet badges under their beds. Others have aunts who talk to their violets. In my family, everyone disappears for 24 hours once a month. I'm 17, and this has been happening my whole life. Usually on the third Saturday of the month. The ritual is always the same. On Friday evenings, my mother makes dinner that can be easily reheated. My father checks the locks on the windows and doors. My older brother Dimka turns off the Wi-Fi router. Then they tell me the passphrase. Anton, we're on family business. You're an adult now. You can handle it. And I'm left alone. I was scared as a child. I'd huddle under the covers and listen to the old house creak, imagining monsters. When I was 10, I cried. I'd cling to my mother's hand, begging her to take me with me. My father would grab me by the shoulders, look me straight in the eyes, and say in an icy voice, "You can't go there, you can't ask ever." His gaze was scarier than any monster under the bed. Over the years, I got used to it. I even found it a plus. I had the house to myself 24/7. I could turn the music down, play the PlayStation until the early hours, and eat chips right on my bed. Pretty for a teenager, right? But the older I got, the more curious I became. What kind of business was it that required disappearing at night, turning off your phones? After their business, my mother would always look incredibly pale and barely eat for days. My father would become silent and constantly stare into space. And Dimka, one night he screamed in his sleep. Not just screamed, he howled. So when I ran into his room, he was sitting on the bed, hugging his knees and rocking back and forth, his eyes empty. In the morning, he pretended nothing had happened. The last straw was last Friday. I was getting ready for my night off. As usual, my father came up to me and put his hand on my shoulder. He smelled of damp earth, like a ditch. "Soon, son. Soon," he said quietly, looking somewhere past me. "Soon, it will be your turn." And in that moment, I realized I couldn't just sit and wait any longer. I had to find out the truth. I spent the whole week preparing. I spent my saved up pocket money on a tiny Wi-Fi camera the size of a coin. I spent a long time choosing a location. In the end, I stuck it on with double-sided tape in the hallway. The viewing angle was perfect. The front door, the stairs to the second floor, and most importantly, the massive wardrobe that had been there, I think since before I was born. Yesterday was that same third Saturday. Everything went according to plan. Dinner, the disconnected router, the phrase, "Anton, we're on family business, the door is double locked." I waited an hour, making sure they were definitely gone. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking as I opened the live stream camera app on my laptop, an empty, dimly lit hallway. And what I saw next was not normal. The clock on the laptop screen showed 2:16, and I was already starting to nod off, deciding that nothing would happen, that they had simply left before I started recording. The hallway was empty. Only the old clock on the wall counted off the seconds. And then, at 2:17, the lock clicked on the basement door, which I'd completely forgotten about. It was always locked, and I thought it was just filled with junk. The door slowly opened, and my mother appeared in the doorway. She was wearing a simple gray dress, her hair pulled back into a tight bun. She held a small wooden box in her hands, like a craft box. She glanced around, even though I was the only one in the house. My father came out next, and then came the first oddity, the one that sent a chill down my spine. He was barefoot, his feet were dirty, he wasn't looking around, and his gaze was fixed on the floor. Dimka was the last to appear. His eyes were completely empty. They didn't go to the front door, they stopped in the middle of the hallway, forming a small circle. Mom put the box on the floor. Dad dropped to his knees. I clutched the mouse, unable to look away. What was this? Some kind of ritual? My mind was feverish, running through the possibilities, one more insane than the next. And then the doors of the old closet in the hallway began to slowly creak open on their own. An absolute unnatural darkness poured in from within, so thick you could almost touch it. From this darkness, they began to emerge. First a woman appeared, in the same gray dress as Mom's, with the same hairstyle. She took a step into the hallway, and I saw her face, or rather, the place where it should have been. There was smooth, taut skin, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just an empty, perfectly smooth oval. I covered my mouth with my hand to keep from screaming. Following her, a man emerged from the closet, tall, like my father, and also faceless. Behind him, a guy about Dimka's height. He moved just like my brother, dancing slightly, and he too had no face. My real family, the ones with faces, stood and silently looked at their doubles, and the faceless ones approached them. The faceless woman reached out and touched my mother's cheek. Mom closed her eyes, and a shudder ran across her face. The faceless man put his hand on my father's shoulder, and Dimka's double stopped dancing and stood opposite my brother, and then they began to change. The figures of my relatives became blurry for a moment, losing their clarity, while the faceless ones, on the contrary, gained it. It seemed they were sucking the life out of my family. The process lasted no more than a minute. When it was all over, my real family, Mom, Dad, Dimka, they turned and stepped into the blackness of the closet. The doors slowly closed behind them, and their copies, the ones without faces, remained standing in the hallway. They stood in silence for another 10 seconds, and then features began to appear on their smooth heads. Here was Mom's mouth. Here were Dad's eyes. Here was Dimka's smile. A minute later, my family was standing in front of me, completely normal in appearance. Mom walked up to the wooden box and picked it up. Dad brushed invisible dust off his pants. Dimka rubbed the back of his head. They looked tired, but ordinary. They walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped outside into the night. I looked at the empty hallway, at the closed closet door. My ears were ringing. I rewound the recording. Once again, the picture didn't change. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't a horizontation. I sat in front of the laptop until the morning. I couldn't help but cry, or scream. Inside there was only icy emptiness. My family. Not my family. Once a month they go into the closet, and these ones come back in their place. Who are they? What do they want? And the worst thing is, where do the real ones go? In the morning they returned, and I heard the key turning in the lock. I was sitting in the kitchen, staring blankly into a cup. The laptop was hidden. The camera turned off. They entered the kitchen. They looked tired, but otherwise as usual after their chores. Hi. Son, Mom was smiling. Didn't you miss me? Are you hungry? I'll make an omelet now. She started taking eggs out of the fridge. Dad silently sat down at the table opposite me. He looked at me with a long, heavy gaze. I tried not to meet his eyes, studying the cracks in the countertop. How was your night? He asked. His voice was hoarse. Fine. I managed. Dimka plopped down on the table next to me, yawning widely. Anton, I downloaded a new game. I'll show you later. Everything was as usual. The omelet was frying in a frying pan. Dad was reading the news on his phone. My brother was talking about his games. If I hadn't seen this recording, I would never have believed that these people weren't my family, or already mine. They so perfectly copied their behavior, their habits, their voices, but I knew. I saw smooth skin, instead of faces. I saw them emerge from the darkness of the old closet. I spent the whole day in a fog. I answered inappropriately, flinched at every sound. I looked at them and tried to find a flaw, but there was nothing. They were perfect. That evening, when I was sitting in my room, trying to pretend to study for a test, there was a knock on the door. Mom came in. She sat down on the edge of my bed. She was holding a mug of milk and honey, like in childhood. You're not yourself today, she said softly. Something happened. I was silent, looking at my textbook. My heart was pounding somewhere in my throat. Did you sleep badly? She put the mug on the nightstand. Yes. I had nightmares. I lied. She was silent for a moment, and then she reached out and placed her hand on my head. Her hand was cold. Icy. Goosebumps crawled across my skin from this touch, and then she leaned down to my ear. Did you see everything? She whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. I froze and held my breath. The blood drained from my face. It knew. I slowly raised my eyes to her. The smile disappeared from her face. Now she looked at me the same way my father had in the morning, studying for a long time. Cameras in the hallway. It was smart. Her whisper was quiet, almost gentle, but it emanated a languid, grave-like chill. We didn't think you'd dare. She continued to stroke my hair with her icy hand. Don't be afraid. We're not angry. You're almost an adult now. Father is right. She stood up to leave. Just as she was about to leave, she turned around. In the dim light of the room, her face seemed blurry, out of focus. She just paused. Next time, letting the words sink in. Next time, I'll have to take you with me. It's time to get acquainted with real family business. The door closed behind her, leaving me alone. The fear passed. Next, the third Saturday, in 4 weeks, and this time, I won't stay home. I'll go with them. There, into the darkness of the old closet, and I'm terrified of finding out who will come out of there instead of me. My sister's boyfriend doesn't age. Hi everyone, I'm Sergey. My sister is dating a guy. His name is Igor. He and Pishacha have been together for 5 years now. I've seen her change, grow up, turn into a confident girl. And him? No, it wasn't immediately obvious. Well, he looks good, takes care of himself, goes to the gym. Good for him. What can you say? But one evening, out of boredom, I scrolled through old photos on my computer. Here they are with Pishacha in their first year. At a party. Here they are a year later at the seaside. So funny, sunburned. And here they are 2 years later, at a friend's wedding. And here's a completely new photo from my birthday a month ago. I opened them all in a row on the screen, and a cold sweat broke out on me. 5 years. 5 fucking years. And not a single new wrinkle around his eyes. The same hairstyle, hair by hair, the same almost laughing smile. Even his posture hadn't changed. He was like a wolf-like figure, imagined from one background to another. Paranoia. I told myself. The person just has good genes, or he's a vampire. Damn it. I giggled stupidly, trying to relieve the tension, but something remained. Mom asked me to help her sort through old boxes, dust, old age and forgotten toys, and among all this junk, I started leafing through her school yearbooks, just killing time. Senior years, funny hairstyles, stupid jackets, and in one of the group photos I froze. In the back row, slightly behind Mom's best friend, there he was, Yegor, the same smile, the same look, and I held the album closer to the light. My heart started pounding like crazy. Not a look-alike guy, not a doppelganger, it was him. Mom, I called. Come here for a second. She peered over my shoulder. Oh, that's our 11 terabyte, and that's me. Look how funny I am. And who is this? And I poked Yegor with my finger. Mom peered closer. The smile slowly faded from her face. She suddenly turned pale. Lesha, she whispered. His name was Alexei then. He was dating Tanya, my friend. There she is standing next to me. Mom, what happened? He was very charming. All the girls were crazy about him. And then Tanya, she disappeared. She just left the house and never came back. They looked for her for several months. They never found her. And soon he left town. And that was it. I looked at Mom's face, then at the photograph, and the puzzle in my head came together to form a monstrous picture. That evening I started calling my sister. The phone was turned off. They must have gone out of town again. There's no reception there. I tried to calm myself down. Yegor loved to surprise her like this. I called all night. Silence. The next day I left the apartment to go to them. There was a small envelope on the doormat. Inside was a photograph. Pishacha and I. Taken last summer. We were fooling around in the park. Only her face had been carefully cut out. All that was left was an empty hole. I called my mom again. She was crying. But through her tears she was able to tell me more. About Alexei. He showed up in their class out of the blue. In the middle of the year. No one knew where he was from. He was different. He was like an adult. Mom whispered into the phone. Too perfect. Tanya was crazy about him. She said he promised her something incredible. To show her a place where they would be together forever. Those words sent shivers down my spine. I remembered Pishacha laughingly telling me a couple of months ago. Can you imagine? Yegor said our love would be forever. He's so weird sometimes. But I adore him. I rushed to the computer. I started Googling everything. A girl named Tatiana had gone missing in night. I found several links to local newspaper archives. The mysterious disappearance of a graduate. The case was high profile, but quickly reached a dead end. No evidence, no witnesses. But one of the articles had a detail that made my insides go cold. The journalist mentioned that investigators had found Tatiana's personal diary. The last entries were frightening and incoherent. Alyosha is not like everyone else. His eyes are cold, like old glass, and he smells of old books, damp earth. He says that youth is a gift that can be preserved. He promised me eternity. I'm a little afraid, but I love him so much. Of old books, of earth. I jumped up and rushed to Kishusha's room. She lived with Yegor, but some of her things were still with us, and he started rummaging through her closet, on the shelves, and came across a gift from him. An old book, bound in leather, untitled. I opened it. The pages were empty, but they emanated that very same smell. Thick, Swedish, the smell of a crypt. And then it dawned on me. Social media. I knew the password to Kishusha's account, the one she once used. I logged in and started reading her correspondence with her best friend. The last messages were sent 3 days ago. Kishusha, Olya, you can't imagine. Yegor is preparing the biggest surprise of my life. We're going away for a couple of days. He said I'll remember it forever. Olya, where this time? Again. This wilds without communication. Kishusha, yes. He finally finished our little house. He says it's our place of power. An old house by the lake, which he restored himself. He sent a photo. Look how beautiful it is. There was a photo attached below, a dilapidated red brick building on the shore of the lake. In the background were the ruins of some other buildings, and I recognized this place. As a child, my parents and I used to go mushroom picking in that area. It was the abandoned Soviet sanatorium Tikaya Zavod, a place with a very bad reputation. The locals avoided it. They said people disappeared there. The drive to Tikaya Zavod took a little over an hour. I left the car at the exit and walked. The sanatorium grounds looked like a set for a horror movie. Dilapidated buildings overgrown with a fountain, with a broken statue of a pioneer. Rusty swings that creaked. But amidst this desolation, I saw it. One house. The same one with the photograph. It really had been restored. A warm, cozy light glowed in the windows. I crept up to the house and peered in. It was strange inside. A modern sofa and a plasma TV on the wall sat next to an antique chest of drawers and a vintage clock. And there were paintings everywhere. Portraits. They depicted girls. Young, beautiful. From different eras. There was a girl in a 1920s-style dress. There was a hippie and a 70s girl, with flowers in her hair. In one of them, I recognized with horror my mother's friend Tanya from her time. And on the easel in the center of the room stood the most recent portrait. Almost finished. It was of my sister Kasiusha. She was sitting in a chair, looking straight ahead. But her eyes, the eyes were empty. Lifeless. The house was unlocked. I entered quietly, and heard a soft sound from behind the slightly open basement door. Descending the creaky steps, I found myself in a cold, damp basement. In the middle of the room, on a spacious wooden table, sat Kasiusha. She was dressed in a white dress. She stared into space. She was alive, but she was not here. As if all the life had been sucked out of her, leaving only an empty shell. Yegor stood next to her, his back to me. Beauty should be eternal, he said quietly, without turning around. The world is so cruel to her. It wrinkles her, makes her visible. I only preserve her. He turned slowly. The same calm and human smile was on his face. No surprise. No anger. I was waiting for you. I knew you would come. Do you want to stop me from giving her eternity? What have you done to her? You freak. I croaked. Me? I didn't do anything. She wanted it herself. Each of them wanted it. They all wanted eternal love. Eternal youth. I simply gave them what they asked for. They will remain forever young, beautiful in my collection. And I simply continue to live. His calm tone made my blood run cold. The ritual was almost over. He looked at Kasiusha again with terrible tenderness. I realized I only had a second. I turned and rushed up the stairs. No. For the first time there was rage in his voice. He rushed after me. And I ran into the living room. The portraits stared at me from the walls with their dead eyes, and I grabbed the heavy bronze candelabra from the Komodo. I tore them apart one by one. With each blow, a tremor seemed to run through the house. A gray, dust-like substance tumbled from the torn canvases, then immediately dissipated. Yegor howled. He didn't try to stop me. He rushed toward the remains of the paintings, trying to collect them. Taking advantage of the moment, I rushed back to the basement. Kasiusha, let's go. I grabbed her hand. It was icy cold. She stood up with difficulty. Her legs wouldn't obey her. I dragged her upstairs through the living room, littered with torn canvases. We ran outside into the cold rain. I saw an old kerosene lamp against the wall of the house. Without a second thought, I smashed the glass, struck a lighter, and threw it through the broken window. The dry wood instantly burst into flames. 6 months passed. We sold the apartment, and moved to another city. Kasusha is slowly coming to her senses. She has partial amnesia. She remembers meeting Jaeger in her last week with him, as if through a fog. The doctors say it's a defense mechanism, but sometimes she wakes up at night and screams. I don't know what happened to him. There was nothing on the news, but I can't sleep peacefully, and I keep looking over my shoulder on the street, checking out faces in the crowd. I'm afraid to see him. And last night I was scrolling through my news feed and came across a report from a small town on the other side of the country. There, in the last month, 3 young girls had disappeared without a trace. The camera was showing a crowd of onlookers behind a police officer, and for a split second, a face in the back row flashed across the frame. Yes, a more familiar face. He wasn't smiling. He was looking straight into the camera, straight at me, and I understood. He simply lost his collection, and now he's collecting a new one. A new room appears in our house every week. My parents say, don't pay attention. We've lived in this house for as long as I can remember. Old, 2-story, one of those built in the last century with thick walls and spacious rooms. It never seemed sinister to me. On the contrary, I loved it. Every corner was familiar. Every scratch on the floor told a story. Until recently, it all started about 2 months ago. The first door appeared in the bathroom, right behind the shower stall, where there used to be a wall covered in white drippings. Now, there was a narrow wooden door without a hand. I jumped out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, and screamed, Mom, Dad, come here. They came. They stood by the bathtub. They looked at the door, then at me. I expected anything. Surprise, shocked, a call to the police, or at least a question. What the hell is this? But instead, Mom said, just don't go in there, Mark. Dad nodded, looking somewhere past the door, at the faucet. Yeah, that's not for you. Are you going to have breakfast? I stood there like an idiot. Drops of water trickled down my back, and only one question pounded in my head. Are you serious? They acted as if I had shown them not a portal to the unknown, but a spider in the corner. I tried to push the door. It didn't open. Deaf, monolithic, as if it were painted on. The next week, a new door appeared in the basement. We rarely went down there. All sorts of junk was stored there. But I went down. Between a shelf with old cans and a dusty bicycle, there was now a low iron door, like the entrance to a bomb shelter. It was cold to the touch, and smelled of rust. I called my parents again. The scenario repeated itself. Exactly. Don't pay attention, darling, Mom said. It's none of our business, Dad added. And they went upstairs, leaving me alone in the semi-darkness of the basement. Their calm was unnatural. It meant they knew. They knew what was going on, and for some reason they were hiding it from me. The third door was in the storage room, on the second floor. The fourth was behind a large bookcase in the living room. I only noticed it when I dropped the remote control behind it. I stopped telling them anything. What's the point? The house began to grow, mutate, and each new door frightened me more and more, and I tried to peer through the cracks, if there were any, but there was only darkness. I started sleeping poorly. It seemed to me that the house was breathing at night. That sounds could be heard from behind those closed doors. Quiet whispers, blinkers, sometimes distant and barely perceptible music. But as soon as I listened, everything became quiet. My parents pretended that everything was fine. We ate dinner, watched TV. They asked about school, but worry appeared in their eyes. They looked at me as if they were expecting something. And then yesterday, a fifth door appeared. It was the creepiest of all. It appeared in my closet, right in the middle of the back wall. The door was an exact copy of the closet door itself, only smaller. Small, almost doll-like. I noticed it when I reached for a clean shirt. My hand came across a cold handle that shouldn't be there. I slowly pulled the hangers back. There it is, perfectly built into the back wall. And this time I didn't call my parents. My fingers trembled as I took hold of the handle. I expected it to stick, like the others, but to my surprise, the handle turned easily. There was a soft click. The door creaked open. I peered inside and saw our living room. For a second, I thought it was some kind of tricky passage that led back into the house, but something was wrong. The lighting, it was dim, like from an old lamp. A guy was sitting on our couch with his back to me. He was wearing my favorite gray sweatshirt, and I recognized my haircut, my hunched shoulders. It was me. Across from me sat my mother, but she looked older, much older. Her hair was almost completely gray. The second me was quietly saying something. I couldn't make out the words. It was an indistinct, monotonous mumble. He wasn't gesturing. He wasn't moving. He just sat and talked into the void, and Mom looked at him, and a tear slowly crept down her cheeks. There were no sounds in the room, except for this quiet scrolling. The clock didn't tick. The street outside the window didn't make noise. I was so overcome with terror that I almost screamed. Perhaps this is my future. I slammed the door with all my might. I pressed my back against the closet, sliding to the floor. My breath caught, and I sat like that for probably an hour, afraid to move. Then, gathering all my willpower into a fist, I opened the closet again. I pushed the clothes aside. There was no door. There was only a solid wooden wall. No traces, as if I imagined it all. That evening at dinner, I couldn't look up at Mom. I kept seeing her aged and exhausted face in front of me. She looked as usual today, tired after work, but still dear, alive, and there I saw a ghost. Dad was tensely cutting a cutlet, looking at his plate. They knew. They definitely knew. From that night on, I couldn't sleep well. I lay in bed with my eyes open and listened. I listened to the house. I heard the floor creak. I heard something humming in the walls. My house was alive, and it was building itself new organs out of wood and plaster. But the worst thing began when I started listening to my parents. Their bedroom was across the wall from mine. I had never listened to their conversations before, but now I pressed my ear to the cold wallpaper. My breath sated. Most of the time they were silent, but sometimes, in the deep silence of the night, I heard whispers. The words came in fragments, but the meaning was clear. They were talking about me. He almost saw. Mom's voice was tense and frightened. I told him in his room it was too risky. Father answered, "It's getting impatient. What will we do if he understands ahead of time? He won't understand. He'll think he's going crazy. It's even better that way. It's cruel, cruel. It would be better to let what happened before happen. Have you forgotten? We made a choice. The house demands its due. The house demands its due." This phrase sank into my brain like icy needles. What choice? I remembered my childhood. It seemed completely normal to me. I didn't remember any tragedies, no terrible events. I was sick like those kids. Broke my arm at 6, fell off my bike. An ordinary life. Or it only seems ordinary to me. Maybe the worst memories have simply been erased. I started keeping a diary. A secret. I wrote down everything. The date and place of each door. What I heard. What I felt. I drew a plan of the house, marking new rooms with crosses. I became withdrawn, suspicious. At school I couldn't concentrate. Constantly thinking about home. I stopped talking to my friends. "Mark, you haven't been yourself lately." Mom slept softly one night at breakfast. "You're sleeping poorly. You've lost weight. Maybe you should talk to a specialist." I almost laughed in her face. It was the perfect move. Convince me that I'm crazy. That all these doors, whispers, visions are a figment of my sick imagination. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, looking them straight in the eyes. I wanted them to see that I'm no longer that naive boy who believes their lies. And they saw. I read fear in their eyes, and I knew that the new door would be the last. I don't know why, I just felt it. It would be the finale. I sat in my room, listening to every rustle. The voice of the walls became louder. It seemed to me I felt some kind of energy flowing throughout the house. And I heard my parents whispering behind the wall again. "It's ready." She said that this would be the last expansion. Mom said, "Will he accept this? He won't have a choice." I understood. They were going to do something to me, something that would silence me forever. I jumped up. I had to get out of this damned house. I rushed to the door of my room. I pulled the handle. Locked. I never locked my door from the inside. I ran to the window. It didn't open. As if the frame was welded. I was trapped. And then I heard a new sound. A slow, heavy scraping. It didn't come from the hallway. It was everywhere. The house was changing right now. Then everything suddenly became silent. Ghoul was gone. All the sounds from the street died down. An absolute vacuum. I froze in the middle of the room, breathing heavily. The door to my room opened itself. I carefully peered out. It was different. The walls were painted a neutral beige, one I had never seen before. There was a new carpet under my feet. All the photos were gone from the walls. I walked down the hallway. The living room. The same furniture, but arranged differently. Too perfect. Like in a furniture catalog. Not a speck of dust. Not a single abandoned item. There was a strange, sterile smell in the air. Like in a hospital. I called. "Mom, Dad." They came out of the kitchen. They were different too. They were wearing clean, pleasant home clothes. Mom was smiling. Dad stood next to her, his hand on her shoulder. "Where are you, son?" Mom said. "We've been waiting for you. Tomorrow is ready." I looked at them, and an icy horror tingled through my limbs. They were them, but at the same time not them. These were perfect versions. "What have you done?" I whispered. "What is this place? Where is our home?" Dad sighed. "This is our home, Mark. He built a perfect world for us. A world where everything is good. And what was before?" I cried out, remembering their whispers in the night. "What choice were you talking about?" Mom lowered her eyes. For the first time her perfect mask wavered. "You were very sick when you were little," Mom said quietly. "Very. The doctors couldn't do anything. We moved into this house, and the house responded. It offered a deal. It would heal you, but in exchange it would grow." I looked at it, and an image popped into my head. "That's you from the closet. Me. Empty. Lifeless. Muttering something on the couch. My aged, unhappy mother. That's the room." I croaked. "Was that one of those futures?" "Yes." Dad nodded. "A future in which the illness returned. But differently. Crippled your mind. The house showed us that. And then it sealed that version. Erased it. Each new room is a moment lived. An accident. Poverty. Quarrels. Illnesses. It removed all of it, leaving only one ideal path. There is no pain here, Mark," Mom said. And tears rang in her voice. Real tears. "There is no fear here. He protected us. He will protect you too." I finally understood. They didn't just sacrifice the future. They sacrificed life itself. With all its flaws. Pain. Joys. For the sake of a sterile, predictable existence. "But I know," I whispered. "I remember. I saw what will happen to me now." They exchanged glances. And in their eyes there was endless love. And endless pain. "A home leaves no unnecessary details, son," said my father. "It builds an ideal world. And in it there is no room for memories. No room for questions." He pointed to the front door. But it was not our old familiar door. It was a new one. "What is behind it?" I asked. Although I already knew the answer. "Another place," said my mother, coming up to me. She kissed my forehead. Her lips were cold as marble. "A place for people like you. For those who remember. We love you very much. Forgive us." The door behind me opened silently. There was no room behind it. No darkness. There was nothing there. Emptiness. A white, endless, soundless void. They didn't push me out. They simply stood and watched. Waiting. I turned around. I looked at my perfect parents in their perfect house, and realized there was no room for me here anymore. I took a step. The last thing I heard before the world disappeared was a soft click, the sound of a door closing in a perfect silent house.